The wolf Zeek and the other thing. The wolf Zeek was eating dinner with his friend Snodgrass the sailor frog. He liked creatures who were healthy eaters and himself never refused seconds. They were eating the wolf Zeek's famous celery stew, pickled beets, wild rice, a staple in every wolf Zeek's diet. And, for dessert, his exquisite butternut squash pie with sarsaparilla syrup. Snodgrass the sailor frog leaned back and loosened his belt. "That was a feast to dream about for weeks," he exclaimed. The wolf Zeek said modestly, "Oh, it was nothing. I just threw this, that, and the other thing, in a few pots and pans." "You know," said Snodgrass suddenly, "I've always wondered what the other thing was." "The other thing?" asked the wolf Zeek with a puzzled look on his face. "Yes," said Snodgrass. "This, that, and the other thing. Whatever is the other thing?" The wolf Zeek for the life of him could not figure out what the other thing was. Soon, Snodgrass, after thanking his host 17 times over, trailed to his slow slippery way back to his cozy home under a beanstalk. The wolf Zeek did not sleep much that night. He tossed, turned, tumbled and twiddled his thumbs until dawn. As soon as the sun rose, the wolf Zeek jumped out of bed with such oomph, he hit his head on the ceiling and hollered with such force, he woke his wise Aunt Tilda clear across town. Immediately, she sped over to the wolf Zeek's house. "Whatever is wrong with you?" cried Aunt Tilda. "You're never up at the first crack of dawn," the wolf Zeek said. "I have not slept a week since thinking about the other thing." "What is the other thing?" asked the curious Aunt Tilda. "I have no idea just now. I'll let you know in a week," said the wolf Zeek with determination. And off he skipped and flew and sailed for many days to hunt down the other thing. For like all wolves, a part of the wolf Zeek would not sleep until he found answers to his questions about life. The wolf Zeek poked through the lushest jungles, hunted in the hottest deserts, paddled through the bog water of swamps, leaped from sand dune to iceberg until long last, on the shore of a little sea, he found the other thing. Now, the wolf Zeek could not tell exactly how he knew it was the other thing except it was not this, and not that, and could only be the other thing. It looked like a falling star. It felt cool and smooth as a mirror, and it smelled like the roots of a dandelion just unearthed. So the wolf Zeek put the other thing in his pocket, galloped furiously home on a speedy white horse, and planted it in his celery garden. The wolf Zeek had a mighty green thumb, so he knew what other things need in order to grow strong. He fed the other thing honeysuckle sap, shaded it with soft palms and recited to it the most encouraging poetry. The townsfolk gathered around the talented wolf Zeek and the other thing to watch him toil and the other thing bloom. Zachary Zeek, the guard of the local greenhouse, asked, "Who would have thought there was such thing as the other thing?" "Well," said Snodgrass humbly, "the motion sort of slipped out at supper time." "Yes," joined in Aunt Tilda. "And the motion continued till dawn." They looked admiringly at the wolf Zeek while he worked. He worked so hard, he went through 12 pairs of gardener's gloves and had a sore throat from reciting so much poetry. Soon, the other thing grew taller than all of them, and the wolf Zeek propped a ladder against it for easy climbing. From each laden branch, a new thing bloomed, rare, beautiful blossoms, blossoms that looked like the antlers of an ancient wildebeest. Dew in a rainstorm. A syllable of sleet. An arrow as long as the world is round. A finch swing. The silvery scale of fish. A soprano's highest note. The townsfolk oohed, and ahhed, applauded, then went home to drink blueberry sap and dream about the answers to life. They'd been awake for days watching the wolf Zeek at work and were content to see the other thing in full bloom. The wolf Zeek still did not sleep. He smelled a magic in the blossoms of the other thing and would not rest until he examined it more closely and smelled its scents more deeply. That evening, the wolf Zeek climbed the ladder, rung by rung, to the very top where the wing blossom grew. This was one of his favorites. No sooner did the blossom fall into his hand when a strange feeling passed through him. Suddenly, the earth dropped from beneath him. He felt lighter than he ever dreamed possible. His arms bent like wire hangers, his heart beat faster than his thoughts, and from his throat came an amazing music. The whole world seemed to rush at him. The velvet bunch and brush of treetops swooped by his keen eye. Every rustle in the grass, far below him now, made his blood race. "I'm flying," cried the wolf Zeek. "I can't believe I'm flying." Soon he was doing loop-de-loops, skating through the air, plummeting, and lurching up again. There wasn't a more delighted wolf Zeek in the whole universe. At the instant of dawn, he came to a halt and crashed back into the branches of the other thing. "What a wondrous flight that was!" exclaimed the wind-shook wolf Zeek to himself, pulling some feathers from his head. He examined the branches and the million different blossoms and thought excitedly about all the days to come. "Endless possibilities, endless dreams," he whispered, then crawled into his soft Zeek bed for a sound sleep. The next day, the wolf Zeek and Snodgrass the sailor frog were having lunch with sweet asparagus and honey yam strudel. The wolf Zeek excitedly told Snodgrass all about his flight, while Snodgrass, chomping on the delectable strudel, looked at him in disbelief. "Nothing like what you've described could possibly happen, even though you are a wolf Zeek, and my dear friend." "You just wait and see," cried the wolf Zeek. He skipped up his ladder to the tip-top of the other thing and plucked the first blossom his hand brushed against. It was the silvery scale of a fish. The wolf Zeek closed his eyes dramatically, waiting for the strange sensation to pass through his body. After a few minutes of not feeling a thing, but the silvery scale blossom limp in his hand, the wolf Zeek opened his eyes again. He scratched his head, shrugged, then dove head first into a bird basin. Clunk! "Ouch!" he exclaimed. Meanwhile, Snodgrass was calmly eating a leftover marigold pollen pie, and watching the foolish actions of the wolf Zeek. "I'm sorry," Snodgrass the sailor frog finally sighed sympathetically. "But I must go now to visit my Uncle Chonch." And off he skidded, leaving in a silvery way. The wolf Zeek was disappointed he couldn't share his experience with Snodgrass. True to the wolf Zeek he didn't brew and stew or feeling blue because of this. First, he picked the blossom resembling a soprano's highest note, closed his eyes, and waited. Nothing. He even tried singing a few bars, but all he heard was his own Zeek tenor. He looked at the many rare and colorful blossoms but didn't have the heart to pick any more. The wolf Zeek realized that the other thing had lost some of its magic for him. Later that night, the wolf Zeek dreamed. He was in a brook, darting and pausing, floating, and skimming on a feathery fin. He was looking to either side of him. He woke up the following morning, sadly knowing his dream was just a dream and not the magical other thing. Gazing forlornly out his window, he sensed a shadow behind him. It was his wise Aunt Tilda. The wolf Zeek offered her some tangerine lime juice, sat her down at the kitchen table, and told her all about his experiences with the other thing. Then he asked for her foolproof Zeek advice. Aunt Tilda said kindly, "I'm sorry, oh wolf Zeek. It appears to me you turned the other thing into something. And now, it's a different thing altogether and has lost the magic of being the other thing. It's the plain old something. You will never fly the way you flew, nor swim like a fish, nor fall like a star. The wolf Zeek was very quiet after this, but true to his Zeekish nature, didn't stay that way for long. Instead, he raced to his garden, dragging Aunt Tilda along to show her an especially magnificent stalk in his celery garden. "Now, isn't this something?" he cried with a wink in his eye. "Just smell the sweet air coming from the blossoms of something." The wolf Zeek spun Aunt Tilda about. She was out of breath. Aunt Tilda laughed with a hearty Zeek laugh and spent the rest of the afternoon helping the wolf Zeek with weed, water and prune. "This whatchamacallit is really handy," said Aunt Tilda to the wolf Zeek, pointing to a gardening tool he'd never used before. "This what?" cried the wolf Zeek with a wolfed glint in his eye. Already had dreams of searching for the wolf whatchamacallit were beginning to fill his head.